The story you're about to hear begins with silence, not the hush of peace, but the awful, mouth-drying lull that hangs before gunpowder's first roar. Imagine the English veteran shivering beneath a Gascon dawn, gaunt from 2 decades of campaigning, hearing only the creak of his own harness and the distant caw of restless crows. He knows the arithmetic of defeat. France, rejuvenated by a shepherd girl's miracle and a king's new resolve, has driven his country from every province except this stubborn shard of Aquitaine. Yet here, on the vine-striped banks of the Dordogne, rumor claims the old lion Talbot will strike one last hammer blow and roll back time itself. Banners whisper promises of plunder, priests mutter half-forgotten benedictions, and every man wonders whether Castillon will be a stepping stone to reclaimed glory, or the grave marker of a century-long dream. Across the river, hidden behind freshly heaped earthworks, a quiet French artillery park waits like a coiled serpent. Its master gunners have perfected a new language of war, one written in iron, flame, and mathematical precision. When those cannons speak, they will rewrite the final chapter of England's longest war, crush a legend of knightly invincibility, and signal the twilight of the medieval age. Stay, listen, and step inside the moment when chivalry met gunpowder and discovered which would shape the future. To understand why the Battle of Castillon matters, we must wind the clock back 96 relentless years to 1337, when Edward III first claimed the throne of France and unleashed the 100 Years' War. From Sluys to Crécy, Poitiers to Agincourt, England rode a crest of unlikely victories, powered by longbowmen, chevauchés, and the audacity of kings who trusted fate more than fortune. Yet, success bred overreach. Gold siphoned from captured ransoms flowed out as quickly as it came in, while plague, peasant revolt, and dynastic intrigue gnawed at the kingdom's sinews. France, for its part, bled but never broke. By the 1440s, a reformed administration, steady taxation, and hard-learned lessons in field fortification forged a new engine of reconquest. The Dauphin, now Charles VII, embraced artillery, hired Italian engineers, and granted free rein to the Bureau brothers, 2 clerks turned gunnery savants who believed iron could trump oak and sinew. Meanwhile, English fortunes withered. Henry VI, shadowed by bouts of catatonic melancholy, ceded initiative to quarrelsome nobles who saw France as a personal treasury rather than a national enterprise. Gascony, England's last continental jewel, became both lifeline and lure. Its wine taxes buoyed the royal purse, yet its defense drained every spare shilling. In 1452, John Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury, gray-haired, one-eyed, and lion-hearted, returned to Bordeaux with a force small in number but immense in reputation. Local loyalties, still nostalgic for Plantagenet rule, swung open the gates, and within months half of southwestern France glittered red-crossed again. Charles VII's response was clinical. He dispatched Jean Bureau with 5,000 picked men-at-arms, 10,000 militia, and the largest field train Europe had ever seen. 300 bronze and wrought iron guns, from stub-nosed serpentines to mighty culverins. By midsummer 1453, Bureau encamped outside the market town of Castillon-la-Bataille, intent on cracking its stone walls, which still flew St. George's ragged banner. He ringed the site with ditch, palisade, and artillery redoubts so interlocked they resembled the teeth of a giant gear. Inside, his gunners trained daily, calibrating ranges to every hedgerow approach. Scouts brought word that Talbot was racing south from Bordeaux, determined to crush the siege before French infantry could entrench. Villagers whispered that cannons alone could never halt the man who had stormed scores of keeps and routed quadruple his numbers at Poitiers. Yet beneath Bureau's measured quiet lay a gambler's certainty. In the coming hours, powder and patience would break the English charge as surely as ball and blade. All roads now converged on a narrow meadow by the Dordogne, where rain-swollen vines slumped under July heat, and destiny waited with a lit match. Talbot's dawn march began with a chorus of iron-shod boots plowing dust from the Roman road. 2,000 veteran archers led, yew-staves taller than men balanced on calloused shoulders, arrow sacks bumping against stained gambesons. Behind them trudged 1,500 billmen and men-at-arms, most clad in patchwork plate salvaged from earlier campaigns, visor hinges squealing with every step. Beside this infantry column rode Talbot's modest cavalry. 300 destriers snorting impatience, riders crested by tarnished gilding that recalled ages when ransom-hungry French counts quailed at such a sight. His banner showed a silver hound chained but straining, an emblem now uncannily prophetic. At a crossroads flanked by poplar trees, Talbot's scouts delivered tidings. Castillon's siege camp sprawled ahead, but rumor placed French cavalry under the Comte de Clermont, roving north of the Dordogne, perhaps poised to flank. Talbot, ever the offensive spirit, dismissed the threat. Better to strike first, overwhelm Bureau, and then turn on Clermont before dusk. He ordered his son, Viscount Lisle, to cross the river with 800 mounted archers, screen the eastern bank, and funnel French fugitives toward the main charge. The younger Talbot saluted, green plumes dancing, unaware he rode into a snare from which no ransom would rescue him. As the English vanguard crested a gentle rise, they beheld the French defenses, a sprawling horseshoe earthwork, roughly 800 paces wide, its lip crowned by freshly cut stakes angled outward like snarling teeth. Between the stakes protruded dozens of small-bore vieuglaires on swivels, their touch holes already smoking. Behind this front line squatted a second rampart, breast-high and thick enough to swallow an ox team, pierced at intervals for heavier culverins. Beyond glinted the tiled roofs of Castillon, but Bureau's men had raised vineyards to grant uninterrupted fields of fire. It looked less like a siege camp than a fortress dropped whole upon the valley floor. Talbot's captains urged caution. One recommended a probing volley to draw out the enemy. Another whispered of waiting for Beaufort's reinforcements. Yet Talbot's blood was up. He had beaten entrenchments before, at Jargeau, Moulins, and countless skirmishes where French walls folded under raw nerve. He rallied his men with a bellow that carried across the meadow. "St. George and Merry England! One push and Bordeaux drinks our victory tonight." Trumpets shrilled, longbows were unbagged, and ranks shook into line. English archers advanced at a trot, halting at 200 paces to fire an opening storm of feathered death. But the French did not sortie. Instead, their camp erupted in coordinated thunder. Dozens of culverins vomited shards of smoke and flame. Iron shot tore jagged holes through advancing files, flinging limbs like autumn branches in a gale. Even seasoned archers, veterans of sieges where artillery barked only fitfully, reeled at the sustained cadence. Within minutes, the neat English arrow cloud thinned, many shafts skittering harmlessly off earthen parapets. Still, Talbot pressed. He spurred ahead on a small bay courser, his mighty warhorse left in Bordeaux to honor a chivalric promise never again to fight mounted. The gesture, noble in intent, proved fatal in effect. On foot, he became easier prey for rising clouds of canister. The second English wave reached the outer barricade and hacked at stakes with axes and swords. Behind them, archers bent spare arrows into makeshift stakes to bridge ditches slick with blood. Yet each breach drew a punishing reply. Inside the redoubt, Bureau choreographed fire like an organist conducting thunder. Light pieces scythed at exposed knees. Medium guns hurled half-pound shot that flattened helmets like pewter cups. Great cannons boomed at clustered standards, collapsing them and sowing confusion. Smoke rolled outward in choking blankets, eclipsing sun and sense alike. Farther east, Lisle's cavalry skirmished across tilled fields where sun-browned peasants ducked into stone outbuildings. French scouts guided Clermont's Castiliers toward a shallow ford. Within a quarter hour, 300 lances splashed across, pennons rippling with fleur-de-lis. Lisle wheeled to face them, but the ground betrayed him. Summer vines tangled his horse's hooves, and archers struggled to string bows in saddle. Clermont's charge slammed home like a hammer striking vellum. Lisle's contingent shattered. Those who escaped galloped west, inadvertently toward their father's embattled camp, with hooves drumming out a dirge. Back at the redoubt, Talbot's infantry finally breached the palisade in two places and poured inside, brandishing poleaxes. For a heartbeat, victory seemed near. A group of French archers broke, shedding quivers as they fled. But the retreat was feigned. As English soldiers surged after them, hidden pits swallowed the front ranks, lined with caltrops and sharpened stakes. Gunners, rolling field pieces down prepared ramps, unleashed point-blank salvos that shredded compact wedges into mangled heaps. Talbot, rallying survivors, called for his reserve cavalry, only to see panic-stricken remnants of Lisle's force hurtling toward him, French banners in murderous pursuit. Horsemen burst through the English rear, sowing terror from flank to flank. Talbot himself was hurled from his mount when a culverin shot killed his horse mid-stride. Pinned beneath the carcass, he waved away nearby archers who tried to free him. "Save yourselves for England," he rasped, still believing his country's fate outweighed his own. Moments later, a squad of French crossbowmen recognized their quarry and advanced. Legend claims a young man-at-arms begged Talbot to surrender. The old earl refused. An iron quarrel ended the parley. With their commanders slain and banners toppled, English formations dissolved. Some fled toward the Dordogne, only to drown beneath the weight of armor. Others attempted last stands among trampled vineyards. French camp followers, emboldened by the turning tide, descended with knives to strip bodies of coin and bootlace alike. By mid-afternoon, silence returned, broken only by the crackle of brush fires fed by burning powder carts. The field belonged to France, and with it, though few grasped it in that moment, the narrative arc of an entire age. In Bordeaux, news arrived like a thunderclap in a crypt. Merchants who had toasted Talbot's march only days earlier now shuttered shops and negotiated surrender terms. Charles VII, hearing of victory, ordered prayers of thanksgiving and set into motion peace overtures that would within months confirm English expulsion from every French soil save Calais. An English chronicler, writing years later, pinpointed Castillon as the hour when our dominion beyond sea was clean lost, and many a brave blood with it. Yet Castillon's significance reached beyond flags. It proved that discipline, logistics, and technological innovation could silence the most glorious knightly reputation. It showcased artillery not as siege curiosity, but as decisive battlefield arm. It foreshadowed Renaissance warfare, where money, mathematics, and engineering would overshadow hereditary valor. And for England, it seeded internal discord that soon blossomed into the Wars of the Roses, a conflict no less bitter for unfolding on home soil. Still, within the English imagination, Talbot's fall hardened into myth. The last paladin, betrayed by modernity. Bards sang of his lion heart trampling muskets. Playwrights, most notably Shakespeare, framed him as tragic bulwark against inevitable change. Across the Channel, French chroniclers hailed Bureau as prophet of artillery's ascendancy, comparing his culverins to thunderbolts cast by Jupiter himself. Some priests claimed heavenly favor, citing that the battle occurred on the feast day of Saint Kenelm, martyr prince turned dragon slayer. Others, more sober, tallied the grain and bronze that had purchased victory and urged continued fiscal vigilance. In the decades that followed, Castillon's meadow returned to vines, its graves plowed under by generations indifferent to dynastic squabbles. Yet archaeologists still unearth shot flattened against oak stakes, arrowheads fused to iron shards. Stand on that ground today, and you can almost chart the choreography. The English advance, sharp as a spear point. The French bastion, hollow yet deadly. The flank charge rolling in like a dark tide. Listen carefully, and perhaps you'll hear echoes. The crack of culverin, the whir of arrow, the final gasp of a world where courage alone could tilt the scales of history. The Battle of Castillon was not merely a conclusion. It was a hinge upon which Europe's future swung. In a single afternoon, the illusion that armored chivalry could resist organized firepower died amid smoke and grapevines. Talbot's lifeblood seeped into Gascon soil, mingling with the remnants of policies that had once projected English authority across the Channel. For France, the victory sealed a national renaissance, empowering kings to centralize power and commission dikes of stone and ordnance that would cradle the early modern state. For England, defeat ushered in an introspective storm, an era where cousins would trade French battlefields for English hedgerows, and where the question of legitimate rule would be contested not in Aquitaine, but at Towton, Tewkesbury, and Bosworth. Castillon thus stands as both terminus and threshold. Terminus of a continental ambition born in Edward III's glittering coronation hall. Threshold to a modern Europe sculpted by gunners, accountants, and courtiers, fluent in the language of centralized crowns. So remember the meadow by the Dordogne when you next hear cannon salute a head of state or see trenches scar a distant newsreel. Remember that every technological leap carries within it the ghost of men like Talbot, valiant yet bound by yesterday's logic, and innovators like Bureau, who glimpse tomorrow's terrible arithmetic before others dare imagine it. And recall that wars may end with treaties, but they truly conclude in moments when one worldview yields to another beneath a thunderclap of irrevocable change. If this journey into Castillon's smoke and steel stirred your imagination, do not let the embers cool. Subscribe to our channel for weekly deep dives into battles where the future pivoted on a single decision, a single invention, a single breath of courage. Like this video so the algorithm's cannons fire our stories farther. Share it with friends who still picture medieval war as jousts and trumpets, and show them how mathematics, mud, and mortal ingenuity shaped the fate of nations. Then join the comments and tell us which forgotten conflict, perhaps the siege of Orléans's last bastion or the naval chess match at Formigny, you want unraveled next. History is not a museum piece. It is a living arsenal of lessons waiting to arm the curious. Stand with us on tomorrow's intellectual ramparts, and together we will keep those lessons firing long after the smoke of Castillon has drifted into legend.